Our next conversation today is with Democratic U.S. Representative Jason Crow of Aurora, joining us from Washington. Congressman Crow, thanks for your time.
Good to be with you, Kyle.
This afternoon, a short time ago, Washington Post as well as the Wall Street Journal are reporting the Trump administration plans to create a registry of every person who is in this country without authorization, including children ages 14 and older, home addresses and fingerprints. Crucially, what both those media outlets report is that failure to register with the government would then be a crime, subject to prison time. So it would take what is the civil offense of being in this country illegally and make it a criminal offense. What's your initial reaction to that? I know this news just came out.
Well, a couple of reactions, Kyle, and I haven't looked at the details of this yet because this is, as you said, just developing news. But first of all, for somebody like Donald Trump, who talks an awful lot about privacy and individual liberty, the idea that he wants national registries of any sort with criminal offenses for not registering, raises some extremely dire personal liberty and privacy questions and how that's going to be implemented. Secondly, this is not the comprehensive immigration reform that our country deserves. Right? There are millions of folks in our country who are working, who own homes, who own businesses that are essential to our economy, who want to normalize their status and have a pathway to citizenship. This could gut that process, and in the process, send shockwaves through our economy, particularly in Colorado, where we already have a workforce shortage.
On the issue of immigration, you said earlier this month that you'd received assurances that Buckley Space Force Base in Aurora was not going to be used for the detention of immigrants who were awaiting deportation. The New York Times reports that Buckley is under consideration from the Trump administration as a detention facility where people would then be routed from there down to Fort Bliss in Texas and out of the country. Have you heard anything about that? Anything changed since you last heard that?
Well, things are always changing with this administration, right? Day to day, hour to hour sometimes. So anytime I do oversight and I talk about the status of something, I'm always saying, as of right now. So when I did that visit, and folks know that I actually do this, I sometimes just show up someplace unannounced, do oversight. I do that at the ICE Detention Center in Aurora. I've done that at the VA hospital. It's actually important sometimes you just show up unannounced. You actually see what the real deal is and what's really going on. So I did that at Buckley last month or earlier this month, I guess, and talked to the immigration and ICE folks there. And they said there are no current plans to use Buckley. And I said, great, but I'm going to be checking in. I'm going to be doing my oversight, and I'm not going to stop doing that. So if things change, of course, we will adapt accordingly.
But you had not heard that it had changed, correct?
No, we didn't get any official information from the Trump administration. Information out of this administration is hard to come by, let's just say that. That's probably the understatement of the century. It's very hard to get anything out of them. A lot of times that's because they actually don't have policies, and folks don't even know, right? It's complete chaos within the administration right now. So in any given moment, there's bad policy, and then there's just actual incompetence as well, and sometimes a mixture of the two.
Let's talk about chaos as a strategy. The Trump administration's stated goal is to flood the zone with action on a number of fronts, kind of challenge Democrats and the courts to keep up. It certainly appears to be working. What should your party be doing to recalibrate its approach to responding to Trump's flood the zone strategy?
Well, I would differ on you on it appears to be working, right? This flooding of the zone, what it actually means, they use that term, but what it actually means is they act without thinking, right? They just do something and they don't think about the consequences of it. They don't think about the legality of it. They just act. And the problem is when you're trying to run a country and a government, those actions have consequences and they bite hard and they inflict a lot of pain on regular Americans who are just trying to live their lives, build businesses, raise families, right? So there's a lot of pain that's being inflicted on Coloradans and folks around the country, number one. Number two, a lot of things they are doing are illegal and unconstitutional and repeatedly being struck down by the courts, Republican and Democratic appointed judges finding these things unconstitutionally. So I don't think it's working. I think they're failing a lot more than they're succeeding. And certainly the infighting within the Trump administration, I mean, it is a viper pit in some of these agencies with some of these nominees that they have and appointees. It's not a recipe for a finely tuned machine. Let's just say that.
It's not clear if House Republicans have the votes that they need to pass a budget. One issue where Democrats have been taking a stand is on cuts to Medicaid. Certainly, waste, fraud, and abuse are typically overstated as savings items. But what would be wrong with digging into the Medicaid system and looking to save taxpayers' money on waste, fraud, and abuse there on Medicaid?
Nothing. There's nothing wrong with actually conducting oversight, looking for waste, fraud, and abuse. When you have systems as large as the Medicaid system, you always find that. In my time in Congress, they have always found, Republican and Democrat administrations have always found instances of waste, fraud, and abuse. And actually, I think we need to do more of that. The problem is that Doge and folks like Elon Musk are taking a sledgehammer to the entire system and inflicting terrible pain on Coloradans, people who are on the verge of losing their homes, people who can't pay for their prescriptions. I just went to a federally qualified health clinic in Aurora just a couple of days ago, and I heard from these patients who are just going to lose their medication. This is going to cost lives. That's what we're dealing with here. So yes, there are efficiencies, there is reform that's necessary, but you don't mess with people's lives and their livelihood and their families in the process of doing it. They're doing it the wrong way.
Congressman, you've been a staunch supporter of Ukraine. President Trump is currently embracing Vladimir Putin and Russia and their narrative about the war, blaming Ukraine for getting invaded, falsely calling Ukraine's leader a dictator. Is there a path to victory for Ukraine without American support?
It's kind of hard to see that, right? Americans, we have been the long pole in the tent, so to speak, in the entire process here. We can bring resources and technology and intelligence support that nobody else can bring. And that's why it's really important we stay engaged, because it's in our national security interests. Our economy is tied to the economy of Europe. Our food security is tied to Ukraine and so many other places in Eastern Europe. And of course, our national security is tied to Ukraine as well. So it's important for us to do that. But we clearly are going to have to find a different way to do that. There's going to have to be security guarantees. There's going to have to be negotiated into this. And I have always said that, like most wars, this will end at a negotiating table. Not every war, but most wars, and this certainly will. But there's a good way to get us on the path to negotiating an end to this in a bad way that undercuts our ability to strike a good deal. And in the process, Donald Trump is not only undercutting the ability to strike a good deal, but he is cozying up in a very disgusting way to dictators like Vladimir Putin. The fact that he cannot say that Vladimir Putin is a dictator and cannot say that he's responsible for this war speaks volumes, and everybody should be ashamed of that.
And lastly, before we go, our time here is not unlimited. Your name is often mentioned as a potential candidate for Colorado governor in 2026, but it's not something that I've ever heard you talk about. Is it a hard no running for governor in 2026? Have you ruled that out?
Well, I'm really focused right now on the Trump administration and what's happening in Washington, and the fact that we have to pass a budget in the next couple of weeks that's going to have tremendous consequences for a lot of Coloradans. The question I always ask is, not what the next job is, not what the next gig is. How do I go up from here? That's the wrong question for anybody in public service to ever ask. The question is, where and when can I serve best? And where can I put myself in the position of serving Coloradans? And right now, I am doing my job in Washington.
The absolute opposite of a hard no. I appreciate that clarity. And Congressman, thank you for your time. I understand you're coming to Colorado this week. You got a town hall in Aurora at Hinckley, and I understand line is already out the door for that. People are thirsty for conversation, apparently.
They are. Yeah, I think my largest town hall to date, it was about 500 or something in the last couple of years. And we had, within 24 hours of posting the notice for this, over 1,500 people sign up. So we're going to answer questions, we're going to engage, and we're going to talk about the path forward.
Congressman Curl, thank you for your time today. Appreciate it.
Thanks.